begin our session with a quick welcome to Dr. Rizwan Akhtar. First of all, I'm very thankful to you that you have managed, this way and made it possible to share a few glimpses of your poems with our students. Before I give this floor to Dr. Rizwan, I would like to share his brief introduction with you all so that you could better catch up with his poems and his occupations with the poetry. He is a professor of English in the full-time faculty of the Institute of English Studies at the University of Punjab. For his PhD, the University of Essex, UK in 2013, he wrote a thesis on Hindu mythology and its appropriation in Indian fiction by modern Indian women writers. He has also published in areas of post-colonial novel, South Asian Sufism, modernism, memory studies, and post-colonial poetry. Rizwan is also a published poet indeed. He has published poems both in magazines and anthologies in United Kingdom, USA and India, New Zealand and South Africa and Australia. Punjab University Press has published his first collection of poems, Lahore, I'm Coming, in 2017. That will be the center of discussion today. And he has been the student of Caribbean poet Derek Walcott. His fresh work will appear in June 2024 in an anthology by the Dragon Soul Press based in the US, which we are looking forward to, in very soon, because that's also the June. So we are expecting that we will get another interaction with you. Before he begins, I would like to share a quick note on his book Lahore, I'm Coming, and particularly with the title of the session, that is Postcolonial Pakistani Poetry, and the way why we should say that the cultural metaphor now has transcended, its space, because we have, witnessed, for example, Bapsi Sidhwa and Sara Suleri. Lahore has always remained a matter of attention for them, and they also have lived there a part of life here too. But however, in poetry, particularly in Dr. Rizwan Akhtar's poetry, we will see that how Lahore is imagined in different ways, and then how it is reimagined in interstitial spaces, which particularly we have discussed in our classroom while referring to Derrida and while referring to Baba as well. But that was totally a different discussion. So the rest is, I would like to now give this floor to Dr. Rizwan so that he could have further, very introductory talk that he has planned, and then each of the students, we have probably 18 students here from our MPhil classroom, so they have also have some poems with them to put some thoughts over it. That will be followed by your quick note. So thank you. Dr. Rizwan, please.
Thank you very much, Yaman, for this generous introduction. First of all, I'm very thankful for creating this opportunity of talking about poetry in general, and of course specifically on postcolonial poetry. And since I have 30 minutes, so I have to say things more laconically and precisely. I will try to be more laconic and precise. Now, when we talk about postcolonial, regardless of the yarn, novel, drama, or in our case poetry, it means that we are responding to colonialism. So for so many people, post-colonialism is a response. What kind of response? One, Numan has mentioned, as we are doing Derrida and Baba in the class, that is a theoretical response, which is very much relevant. But there is another kind of response, perhaps today, with which we are engaging today, is the aesthetic response, or let's break down it into aesthetic plus poetic response, or you can say a response that is deeply steeped in literary consciousness, a literary response. So, since you are doing some theory in your class, I'm sure you are familiar with this fact that it was actually Foucault who coined this expression, if I'm not wrong, two-sided subject. So we are arguably the new science subjects because we have lived under the yoke of colonialism, and it hasn't left us up till yet, although there's a lot of talk about decolonization. So I tell my students that when you are talking about colonialism, your basic paradigm actually is decolonialism or decolonization. So our primary paradigm is obviously decolonization, whether it is novel, whether it is poetry, or any other genre. So I think that it's our position, as a writer or as a reader of colonialism, is the position which is what you call genre's face, because we are both it's just like a statue which has two faces, genre's face, which engages both with the discourses and praxis of colonialism and post-colonialism. So, colonialism and post-colonialism are inextricably woven with one another. Therefore, I think it is very important to grasp, the concept of colonialism, for which we do not have much time today, obviously, So as a theory, you all know what colonialism is, you see, and this whole politics of geographical expansionism, such as the text like Heart of Darkness talk about, and how, the Western, notion of geopolitics is or has been or is. So the concept of the power and what Foucault says, the docile subject are integral part of the colonialist discourse, So Foucault proposed this idea. I'm sure some of you must have also been familiar with Fanon, who was a psychiatrist, you see. So when Foucault coined this phrase, docile subject, he means it's a subject that is submissive. Now ask yourself, are you a submissive subject? And this submissive subject is also a creative subject, righteous. Are they really creative? Are they really submissive? If they are, then who's writing back to the empire? So they are not submissive, but they are actually stereotyped as submissive. So you are all familiar with the works of Orientalism, such as cultural imperialism, that how this otherization has been constructed, why we are meek and docile in the eyes of the colonizers. So I think it is the psychological character of the colonized by the colonizer. So our psychological character, according to the colonizer, is the character of a docile subject. So docile is something that you encounter by reading all these various yarns by the post-colonial authors, traditional, experimental, 19th century, 20th century, you name it. So the colonial mind imagined us as someone, that was docile, and themselves they thought that they have the burden, what Kipling famously called white man's burden. So these are the things that you often read about while reading post-colonial literature. So that means that we are in a process. Now the next question, which is pertinent as the title of this talk is Post-colonial poetry, and then the second part is beyond the cultural metaphor. Now the very word beyond means that while I live in Lahore, I also live in other places. Beyond the culture I am born into, beyond the culture I engage with, I intimate with, or which is a part of my roots, identity, beyond. It means that I'm very much at home, but at the same time, I am somewhere else, which also gives us this rather creepy feeling of self-exile, actually. So before I go into that in the later part, let's put ourselves this question. What is post-colonial poetry? How is post-colonial, or rather post-colonial poetry is like or unlike the post-colonial novel? Because when you're reading a course of post-colonial literature, you also read novel, you also read drama, you read memoir, as Noman mentioned, Sarah Solari's, you see, which is also a memoir, and you also read TV. So do you think that, ask yourself as students, reading post-colonial poetry specifically, and which is also a discussion, that whether post-colonial poetry is very much like the post-colonial novel. And when I say very much like, it's a little overgeneralization, because of course these are two different yawns, novel and poetry. What a novelist may say in 1,000 pages, a poet may even say 10 lines, 2 lines. So you know the yawn, it's a very different yawn poetry. So then there is also theory, and other related genres. So what paradigms are most productive for interpreting post-colonial poetry? What paradigms? Interpretation is the first thing. So to answer these questions, or to approach these notions, you see, we need some kind of a model, actually, that is there any model available? Because Moman has also said that it is not, now is this going beyond. Now, if you are familiar with the works of Prof, he wrote a very influential essay in the late 70s, the Pakistani idiom, in which and is considered the pioneer of that Pakistani idiom. Similarly, poets like Ramanujan, or in India, Dilrawala, and many other poets who were writing in the 60s and 70s, they laid the base of the Indian English poetry's canonization of poetry. That what are the historical base of that poetry? 1947 is a very important event. India became a nation, we became a nation. So Indian English language poetry is now a recognized canon, which also means that the rules laid by the writers or the poets, and it means that it also has a critical body. There's a criticism on that. Unfortunately, Pakistan English language poetry does not have that much, critical discourse. So it's a yawn in Pakistani context that is still in its, I would still say, is something that is still getting into shape, still, unfortunately. But that's a separate issue. So going back to the question of paradigm. So we see that post-colonial poetry means poetry, first of all, written by non-European people. But me, you, and those who want to write, we are all somehow, whether we like it or not, whether we accept it or not, or whether we accept it demurringly, reluctantly, and whether we show psychological inhibitions, we are writing under the shadow of colonialism. I mean, if you read Derek Walcott, you will see that how Derek Walcott is trapped in this double prism of home and exile, in this prism of home and exile that should never come out of it. So in many of Derek Walcott poems, he says, when I return to my home, when I go back to St. Lucia where he was born, but he also lived in nice places in America and other parts of Europe, and his work is eclectic. It has that element what you call modernist polyphonic, and across the spectrum, global audience, but also the indigenous Caribbean audience. So post-colonial poets like post-colonial novelists, you see, they are also writing in the shadow of colonialism. But second is a question as Rafat was very much concerned about the indigenous, the local, that can we really have a local idiom of poetry? African writers like H.P. also wrote on that, and they always thought that they can mold English according to the indigenous purposes, you see. So this is a very complex question actually about language. This is not our first concern today. So after independence and in the immediate period, which led up to the independence one, particularly works that engage indirectly or obliquely, as these are the works, or this is the poetry, which actually is in the interstices or interstices between Western colonialism and non-European cultures. Now, here the word comes beyond the cultural metaphor. That means post-colonial poets are writing about the non-European culture, but they also tend to go beyond that cultural metaphor. When I read Rafat, and that's my personal opinion, I think that Rafat is not those kind of poets who go beyond the cultural metaphor forcefully, compulsively, or which Ashmi Hashmi does. Because Ashmi lived abroad, he lived in Europe. So when you compare the two poets, you will find there's a huge difference. That's how they write and from where they are speaking. That does not, either case, in both cases, is a limitation, not at all. Of course, it's just a matter of perspective. So for me, the most important perspective is the immediate perspective. But there is also a perspective which is beyond, So when this title came in front of me, the word beyond also suggests implicitly, indirectly, actually hybridity. So beyond the culture, that means there are other cultures which you're supposed to engage with, cultures which you cannot, because you have lived under the shadow of colonialism. So that's why I said that it's kind of a Jonas face situation, So decolonization eventually becomes the paradigm for conceptualizing postcolonial poetry. I mean, if I am teaching, I will start always with saying that cultural imperialism, Orientalism, and of course there are many other works you see, so which you can look into. Specifically, the Caribbean poet and critic Brett White's work, History of the Voice. Because a postcolonial writer is also a writer of history, because he is trying to reclaim the past, what is lost. Now, when I use the word lost, it also reminds me of Irish poet Seamus Heaney, his famous essay, A Redress of Poetry. So I think Ireland has also been a colony, a different situation, in which the colonizer was also white, the white colonialism. So Ireland's situation is like us, but still not like us. Very different. This is another thing, just like settler colonialism, settler colonial literature. So Brad White's book, History of Voice, which came in 1984, and then of course very interesting collection. You see Robert Young's Postcolonialism, perhaps in the first decade. So decolonization movements swept across Asia, Africa, Oceania, Caribbean, and elsewhere. And of course India and Pakistan. But the postcolonial poetry is a very huge category. It's not simply Caribbean, South Asian, African. It's also British. There are many writers who are immigrant writers who live in England, who live in France, Belgium, or Portugal, or Italy, or Spain, and other modern European colonial, metropolitan centers, you see. So they also, this group, just like Latin American literature, is also post-colonial. Since the title is postcolonial poetry, that's what I'm talking about, the other geographical constituencies. So the second point in my talk was that find out a paradigm. And what is the paradigm? Decolonizing. Now, one of the most mind-boggling questions is about language. You write in English, the language of the oppressor, the language of the colonizer, the language or the tongue of the enemy. Irish poet Seamus Heaney, he wrote in English because Irish language is dead. Irish language is dead because of British colonization. More than 500 years of British colonization killed the Irish language. What is more traumatic than losing your national or your mother tongue? That is perhaps the greatest of the wound a nation, a community, a group, an individual can suffer. What else but language? We know that a part of this country was also lost because of the language issue. So language is a very important aspect. Of course, those countries who have lived under the British colonialism, they write most in English, but there are many Caribbean countries which were colonized simultaneously by the Brits and the French, and even Portuguese and the Spanish. Jamaica is an example. Jamaican writers are very, they're very anthropological writers, engaging with the local dialects and colonial language at the same time. So when we say beyond the cultural metaphor, it means that we have to have some kind of cultural mixing. So sometimes when you read a poem by postcolonial writer, you find very seminal point in his essay. Now, listen very carefully. That by simply using language, or by simply using words from your own language, for example, Urdu, will not make you a great poet. It means that whenever you are using a word from your domestic or your local or your regional language, it's the most important thing is that whether it is the imagination that the cultural mixing. Now you see the word mixing, that also points out to the process of hybridity. It's because since we writing and since we are living somehow, still under the shadow of the club, although many people would raise eyebrows, like this sounds very complacent. How come you can say we are still living under the shadow of colonialism? We are independent. And we know that how much independent these colonies are, politically speaking, ideologically speaking. So decolonization brought independence, but there is always a question, what kind of independence? Whether this independence is complete, which is another kind of a monolithic concept, because there is no complete independence, even if there is. But yes, there is creative independence. The creative independence that writing demonstrates and exhibits, you see. So racial mixing is another factor. So when you read a poem by a Pakistani poet or Indian poet, they often use one poem that keeps coming back to my mind, and I would suggest the student to read that poem by Indian poet Sujata Bhatt. It's a very famous poem. The poem is In Search of My Tongue. So tongue is also an autonomy, tongue is also is also a synonym for language, you can say. In that particular poem, she uses English, but she also uses 7-8 lines from her indigenous mother tongue, Marathi. And she says in the poem that there is one tongue, but underneath there is another tongue. It means I'm bilingual or trilingual or multilingual, something like that. So it is impossible, you see, to be monolingual. But writers who write in English, and I'm going back again to Rafat's essay, the Pakistani idiom. In that essay, Rafat hoped that in future, Pakistani poets will find their niche. They will achieve a particular kind of an idiom, which he achieved also. Or perhaps only he achieved that. And they believe that if you keep on reading your own writers, now here I mean owned by your writers who have written in your mother tongue. Since Urdu came to our with the independence, so we often connect our past or history with the history of Urdu language in India and the literature written in Urdu. In that particular essay, and if you don't have the essay, I will share it with Mama. In that essay, Rafat said that I hope that in times to come, Pakistani writers will also be able to achieve or invent that idiom, but there is a condition. If they start, or if they have read writers, for example, like Iqbal and Khusro. Khusro wrote in Persian largely, but he was the first Urdu language poet. Ghalib wrote also in Persian and English, and so Iqbal also wrote in Persian and Urdu. Sorry, Ghalib didn't write in English. He wrote in Persian and Urdu. It means that these writers were convening the gold in one language. When you are convening the gold in one language, you are also mixing language. You know that Urdu is a language which comprises words from Arabic, Persian, Turkish, a few words from Turkish. So no language can claim that it is a pure language, just like Arabic language has words from Hebrew. So this cultural mixing is an inevitable historical process. Let us take, so even writers who write in English, if they have read their own writers, it means that they are linked with the regional tradition. That point in postcolonial poetry is very important, both as a reader and as a teacher, to tell that these poets writing in English language from India and Pakistan, from Caribbeans are very strong in their in the depiction of their regional ethos, regional dialects, regional mythos, and everything that belongs to the land. So there is this euphemism, son of the soil. Paul on the prodigal son. But the prodigal son is also a globetrotter who goes to other places, other geographies, just like this talk is beyond the cultural metaphor. But there are certain metaphors in my home language will inspire me, but there are certain metaphors which I will mix with other metaphors. What you call in chemistry some kind of a process of osmosis. This mixing, this evolving is very important. So hybridity is one thing that allows us actually for cultural mixing. It means that identity also becomes a mixed identity. But since postcolonial writers are very conscious of their past and history, they also engage with what you call counter narratives. And they remain just like the Jagabat's poem, In Search of My Tongue, that in which he's clearly saying, look, my mother's tongue was Marathi, but I'm a product of an English colonial education system. Both tongues or both languages have their relevant or respective claims. So there is a state of dilemma. Or the question of loyalty and betrayal. Which way I should go? English, Marathi, or any other language, or any other language that I'm bred up with. Just like we are all, most of us are bred up with Urdu, Punjabi, or any other regional languages. So there are these writers who, on the one hand, are conscious of the past, but they are also connected with the global realities now. I think Mohsen Ahmed is the one novel which talks about, in which he says, look, this novel is about post-colonialism, but at the same time, you cannot say that you can jump over the colonialism. You can say, okay, I have nothing to do with colonialism. No. Although, and we know that globalization has taken its toll upon us, and this is yet another, some people argue, is a form of Western colonization, a disguised form of Western colonization. So these writers, these poets, Indian poets, they are very much conscious of these, I'd say, counter narratives. The thing is that the most prominent poet from English language poet from India, he was basically past Jew, he lived in Bombay most of his life. His poetry is deeply connected to Indian situations, political situations. But I think sometimes when you read his poetry, to me he looks like Robert Browning writing about the Victorian age. Because Queen Victoria was also Queen Victoria of India, and there were certain Victorian values which the Indian societies also copied, absorbed, or assimilated. So he was also writing about the Indian versions of Victorianism. And in this way they are also challenging the hegemonic Western narratives, these counter narratives of these poets writing now in English. But again, when you talk about thematically postcolonial poetry, you think that basically most of the postcolonial poetry is foregrounds, anti-colonial and anti-racist, anti-racist elements. So one way or the other, broadly speaking, postcolonial poetry, it questions the precise distinctions between outsiders and insiders. So the poets writing in poetry, they are insider because they are somehow writing under the shadows of colonialism. But on the other hand, they are also outsiders because they are writing in English language or the colonial language. So this situation is quite complex. This distinction between outsiders and insiders. Derek Walcott often in his poems talk about that, look, my grandfather was this, my grandmother was this, and I am a mixed, Voluto or Serial or I'm a byproduct of two cultures. So he famously said that, look, I love Shakespeare doesn't mean that I love the British throne or queen. My passport is not red, my passport is green, Irish. The Ireland, Irish. Republic of Ireland is one and is independent of United Kingdom because Ireland is divided, you see. So it means that writers are very much conscious of their context, identity, language and all these things. But still their position is both of an insider and outsider. So a postcolonial poet, for me, is a writer who is questioning the political distinctions, who is questioning history, but from the position of an outsider and an insider. So that is why the postcolonial poetry makes itself available, for different kind of forms of language, and there are different definitions of home. So it's not one singular definition of a home that we encounter. So a postcolonial poet is on a project of world unmaking and the world remaking. So on the one hand he is unmaking, and on the other hand he is remaking. Some years back I read about modern poets that in modern poetry the language is quite deformed. The reason is that because writers are also living under deformed systems, totalitarian regimes, repression. So their language also finds an element of what you call deformed or disfigured. But they really write down of it just like alien. So you don't find any, I find a lot of resonance of modern, Eliot, Ezra Pound, all these white writers, British writers, in the poetry written by Indian and Pakistani poets. This resonance is inevitable because, once again, of living under the shadow of colonialism. But that doesn't mean that they do not have their original voice. And yet these poets have their original voice, because when only those poets have their original voice who can reinvent, is because they are closely connected to their tradition. Tradition is very important. And I always tell my students to go to the areas as situation and individual talent. So that's why these poets on the one hand these poets are actually involved on a project of world unmaking and world remaking. So on the one hand you are unmaking, and on the other hand you are remaking. So I think that there is another point that comes to my mind. I think it's by Jamaican poet Louis Barrett. She wrote a poem in 6 to 6, Reverse Colonialism. So these poets, post-colonial poets from Africa, from Caribbean, from Latin America, from South Asia, they are all poets actually who are somehow reinventing. But in this process of reinventing, they often borrow. So the borrowing is a standard post-colonial practice. One should not take it as mere imitation, or one should not be embarrassed that it is some kind of derivativeness. No, because these poets are, I go back to, unmaking and remaking. So that is why only in this way, if you just imagine now that they can go beyond the cultural metaphor. Beyond the cultural metaphor also means that while on the one hand they pay attention to the local culture, the metaphor that is sown in the local culture, but they can also transplant that metaphor. That's called transnationalism. So one writer I would suggest you to read very closely, and specifically his book, The Writer Used by Tayyaba Rana. He's a professor of poetry at the University of Virginia. I think his contribution to the postcolonial poetry is enormous. And of course, after Jahan Ansari, you can also look into the works of Helen Redford, but she is not the postcolonial specialist, you see. She's the one who talks about the sheer pleasure of writing poetry. So I think that this in-betweenness, this situation, the unmaking and the remaking, this is the cultural in-betweenness which all postcolonial poets have. And there's a tension in that in-betweenness. There are ambiguities and tensions in this cultural in-betweenness. That while on the one hand you're very much conscious of your indigenous identity, but you're also conscious of the fact that you're writing in a language. That's why there are a lot of theories about decolonizing language, English language. So many people claim that English language is decolonized. I'm not sure if this claim is complete. I think this is something that will remain always a contentious proposition, whether English language can be completely or can be at all decolonized, you see. But of course, the question of aesthetics is very important, from where I started, that the post-colonial literature is an aesthetic response. So that aesthetic response is very important. So my yardstick, my parameter would be that if a poet is able to invest, is able to plant or invest indigenous aesthetics, then I think that he is very much able to do the job. But then we saw that modernism arrived to us through colonial, what you call Western modernity. So these poets who on the one hand are writing about indigenous aesthetics, they are also engaging with Western modernism. Now this position becomes even more complex actually. And I think it opens an array of questions actually, you see. So I think there is always a need of reconceptualizing, of revisiting actually. So I think that is why I always prefer Helen Whittier, because she says that close reading is very important. When you read a poem closely, that's a very traditional way of looking at poetry. That when you're looking at the text of a poem with a microscopic attention from outside, and then you become a close reader. And by reading the close poems, closely, you can actually find out the difference in fact, you know. That this is a poem written in English, but by someone who is not English by ethnicity or any other ethnicity. Which on the other hand also means that politicization of aesthetics is very important. It also means that the postcolonial poets and writers, they are involved in this what I think Adorno, the theorist of the aesthetics, the politicization of aesthetics, because this is inevitable, the politicization of art. So it means that these poets who are writing, when you use the word post-colonial, it means ideological actually. So there has to be an ideological engagement. If there is a synthesis, it is an ideological synthesis. Because if you believe that art is ultimately superior to political life, that is one way. Another way that art is ultimately subordinate to political life, that's another way of looking at it. But you can't separate the both. So, for me, a postcolonial poet is someone who cannot separate politics and aesthetics, although their apparatus clash. The apparatus of art and the apparatus of politics do clash. But I think the reconciliation between the two helps the postcolonial poet to present his case actually. That's what he called the redempts of poetry. Because he also lived in a politically turbulent place, years and centuries of colonization. So in this brief time given to me, I've tried to highlight some of the things which I hope which may open up, mind, or which would allow you to put more questions actually. That, for example, what is postcolonial poetry and how different it is from postcolonial novel? Of course, there are so many things which are common, but you know that poetry is a different kind of genre. Its imperatives are different. Its compositions are different. You see, its form is different. Most important thing. So this is what I can say about postcolonial poetry in 30 minutes or so. Thank you.
So, sir, my question regarding that is that did you have a spiritual approach to it, or were you more into a religious or a multicultural dilemma when you were writing down the poem? Because I see it has multiple dimensions to it.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are multiple dimensions, but then you also have to sort out that which of the dimensions the reader, decided to actually more. You say that spiritual, yes, because somewhere in the poem you will see that the dancing girls dance is very much like the dance of the violin, the race of Rumi, which is the spiritual aspect. And you know that the courtesans in the Indian tradition, they were very cultured women. They were very cultured women in the sense that they knew about spirituality, they also knew about aesthetics, art, poetry, and other performances, just like dances are performed. So it means Just like in Musharraf Ali Farooqi's novel, Between Clay and Dust, he talks about the decline of the institution of courtesan, because in the Islamized version of the state or the culture or society, a courtesan is a prostitute, and which she's not. Courtesan is not at all a prostitute, because courtesans were women who were given the custody of the children of the royalty. So, and we know that spiritualism is an integral part of Indian art. Whether you are a Muslim or whether you are Hindu or you are Sikh or any other religion. Particularly courtesans, you see, they were the women who were also poets, and there were some courtesans who were also in the company of the Sufis, you see. And there is no way that the spiritual element could not infiltrate into their lives. So the cultural, the spiritual, the aesthetic, they all find ways. And dance is the one performative form which can convey the cultural, the materialist, the spiritual aspects actually. The body movement of a dancer, the intricate body movement, I would say. That's what the poem is about, is that body encounters mystical worlds. The body repeats encountering, it is rotating, but it has a center, just like with the whirling dervish dance, you see. And the body exudes intricate bodily expressions, just like of the dance, which is an Indian classical dance. And there are many other forms of that. Those who lack skills or desires growing on audience. So these dancers, they are so tempting, they are so aesthetically seductive, and even physically seductive, that they grow on audience consciousness. So this is the way art and culture was an integral part of pre-colonial India, or perhaps post-1947 India, which unfortunately is no more the situation. So it's an old Lahore. It means that there is a new Lahore too. It means that these dancers, these courtesans are now invisible. They are the figures of past. They are blackness. No one talks about them. But their memory haunts us, as the poem is also about this. And there's no way that you can see. But in the later part of the poem, there's talk about the rickshaws and the donkey cars. This is the new Lahore. The Lahore perhaps which still has that glory of the old Lahore, but still a Lahore which is a little bit tainted by the material greed, by the dash urban culture, by political neglect, I think, not preserving the history, and doesn't paying attention. So this is a kind of a cultural crisis also, of Pakistani state also, and much more. I hope it makes sense.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. I really wish I would have come across this point a little earlier, because recently we had an international conference at UNK, and my presentation was regarding imbalance and scarcity of the prostitutes of the Shahi Mohalla that we have in Lahore. So your point actually gives me the same vibe that I presented at the conference, because it's going to find a line between prostitutes and survivors who are very high level women in those times.
Yeah, there's a very influential woman, and not many people know that this famous Yuva Mandi that is in the which is named after the Prime Minister of Punjab, the Maharaja Ranjit Singh's minister, Hira Singh, is named after him. That particular place, Yuva Mandi, the Taxali, and how this did it. And many courtesans at that time actually, they got involved in secret political, or we can say underground issues, you see, because their courthouse became the hideout for many freedom fighters actually. So these are very powerful women actually. So no one even could question their authority in those days. but such is the decline of the institution actually. And you were right actually when you say that spiritual, because in the last part of the poem we see that the spatial connection between the Lahore fort, Hirabandi, and the Badshai Mosque. The spiritual, the sacred, and the world goes side by side.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rizwan, for sharing your brief thoughts on the dancing courtesans of old Lahore. I believe, yes, that's a wonderful poem. Yes, I think Noor is the next one because she raised her hand first. Yes, Noor. Yeah.
Yes, indeed, I'm very intellectual and I've learned a lot from you. Thank you so much for being there, sir, and thank you so much, everyone, for conducting such a wonderful session. My question is actually, I have gone through one of your poem, and actually the title is so much influential, love in the time of load sharing. But I'm not going to ask related to that poem. My question actually is, your work has been published globally, including Canada, UK, India, New Zealand. How do you navigate the complexities of representing our homeland, your and mine, while appealing to diverse audiences by all these poems? I hope you got my point.
I think briefly I touched upon this element in my talk, that this is what you say, navigating different geographies, different cultures, and presenting the word. It means that yes, there is sometimes the poems that you're writing and the places which you are choosing to submit. How can you make this kind of writing, convincible for the editors to select or to reject? But it's very difficult to really explain the situation, but I think that, as I earlier said, that the writers or the poets are writing, in the end, it all becomes, you see, language. It's the presentation actually that becomes the final call. That it doesn't matter what you are writing. It matters how you are writing. What you are writing is not the question. The question is how you are writing. That is about language actually. So I think if I congratulate myself in a vain manner, I would say that sometimes my poems are selected because I'm consciously writing in a language that resonate with the modernist language which you are reading from the times of Eliot to John Ashbery or many of the postmodernist poets, you see. So I think it's the language that makes them accessible to the global audience. It's a language. They may not know a lot about it, but then there are many poems in this collection, and I'm still writing about Lahore. Lahore is a part of my poetic consciousness. It will never go away. It's postmodern Lahore. It's a global Lahore. It's the urban Lahore. Environmentally damaged Lahore. There are points in this, you see. So I think it's the presentation, it's the language part. Just like I said that modern poets or modern writers like to deform the language. Now, don't take that word deformed in negative sense, you see. It means that they live under deformed conditions. So that is why their language becomes deformed. Which means that it's a language that is loaded with issues connected to politics and art. And perhaps the global audience is interested in that. Unfortunately, Lahore is the most polluted city. Well, it's the most beautiful city at the same time. It's culturally vibrant, it's historically loaded. There's a lot of dust, but there's a lot of culture also. So the world is interested in knowing that. But again, it comes to the writer, how you present your content. So speaking on the point of view of a poet, I think that language will ultimately decide, the fate of a poem in these times.
Thank you so much, sir. Before we move towards our other students, I thought to just take a question from one of the outside student or the participant who is Mashal Shahid from Air University. And probably if you can open your chat box, you can see a question she has probably have shared with you, and in which she is trying to focus on the concern of, like how yes,
corners.
yes,
That's punctuation and capitalization. It seems to be employing the technique of stream of consciousness. Yes, where the writer assumes, unlike the the reader will catch on with. Yes, that's what Catherine Bell says reader response theory. And with the sudden jumps in physical and metaphorical coordinates. Okay. Yes, as a reader of the poem, not as a writer of the poem, I tend to agree with that for the love of. But I think that the poem has this, the climax is perhaps something that explains to us, this twist at the end that, this is a poem which is also steeped in romantic tradition, but obviously a poem which is about negotiating spaces, you see. And claustrophobia, is not something that we love to have around us. So we don't want to be claustrophobic, but don't you think love makes us claustrophobic? Don't you think that it compels us to go into corners, figuratively speaking? I think on the whole, this poem is, yes, I agree with that. Doing away with punctuation means that you want a more fluid, unobtrusive, intractable communication. And capitalization, of course. Why capitalize, I mean? Which also is a kind of a postmodernist trend, a postmodernist gesture. Does capitalization mean prominence? Prominence mean grand narratives. Why? Well, this is just an ordinary lover who is in search of a space, a corner. He's a bit like Prof, the Profian no one. Somebody who's just hoping to have some space for love. But obviously in times in which you do not find a space for love, so this is not precisely about romantic love. This is about love as a human need, and the need for space actually in a world which is growingly becoming difficult for living, becoming unlivable, violence and all that stuff that is happening around us, you see. So, but you see, just imagine the image of someone, maybe a child, a person in asylum, who is crouching in a corner. Just see the space, see the philosophical and epistemological significance of the corner. What kind of a space a corner is? Some people love corners, nooks, corners, hideouts, basements, attics, creepy holes, and blah blah blah. I hope that explains it.
Yeah, thank you so much for responding to what Mashal has concerned. Now, Sajid Ali has just raised his hand. So yes, Sajid, which poem you are going to discuss, and let's hear what you want to say about it.
Sir, I chose the poem. The poem is the right arm man. And I did it and I got it to what the message is conveying in this poem. The Night of Memory? Yes, sir. Okay. That's page number?
So we have also opened it on the screen, but its page number is 64.
Right. Go ahead, please. I've got the point. Okay, sir.
Yes, Sajid.
Yes, sir. Wind ran from one place to another, like Greek drops evoke antiphonals, spectacles, Jolic frenzy of the pillow, Wilmot's daisy towers, branches fell like flames on roads, in blank spaces, all shells were snapped. Their feet big, metallic bones, tires smoking, dry puddles repaved. Memory lost on the wheel in the morning. Our collected shared of the mirrors, skeletons, all of us love our fragment show pure eyes. So what's
Yes, Sajid, what's your concern? So it was not only about reading. I'm expecting that you are going to put some thoughts on it.
What really appealed you about the poem? I'm interested in knowing this.
Yes.
Sir, my question was the first two said I got it very easily. Because in the when you like use Greek songs, it is related to the pandemic or famous pandemic art issues in this Greek songs. And the second is branches are like in black speeds or sharp per snap. They are big metallic tones. I just need the interpretation of these two lines. You just want me to talk about these two lines? Yes, sir. So you have to grasp the poem in totality, but the modern poem is always, is a fragmented piece. Is always something that you need to collect actually. That you would just call like a scrabble or just like a puzzle, you have to put things in places, you see. That makes the reader's job really difficult. And sometimes modern poem is not really a reader-friendly poem, I'm afraid to say that. But you see the poem in totality, and it's about the memory of a night. Something happened in the veranda. Let's read the poem from the bottom actually. There is a mirror broken in the veranda. And the persona is picking the pieces, the shreds of the mirror. And in this mirror, he also sees someone's eyes actually. As if it's not the mirror, it's the face and the memory that has broken. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Alright, now let's listen a little bit more. So, memory is also like a mirror. Here you see the mirror face analogy. But I think this also points out to some kind of a tragic incident. As you watch the show, as you watch the chorus on the green theatre on the drum, the strophes, the movement from right to left and from left to right. And then the spectacle is another part of a great drama. So the poem is modeled a lot from the art of dramaturgy. So it's a kind of a poem that is about other young too. Tragedy, the dramatic art, And then the poetic frenzy of middle outside there are trees. They're in frenzy. Like the chorus sometimes in frenzy. And there are easy drivers on the road. So you can see that there might be an incident or accident that has happened on the road. And the impact is so powerful that something is broken in the veranda of the mirror. So it's about the tragic impact of something. It was a night. I hope this explains a bit.
Exactly. And yes, but we were expecting more from you, Sajid. But anyway, next time we will catch up with you. Let's have now Ahmer with us. If Ahmer Nawaz is here, I think you have selected the poem from Empire's Days in Lahore.
Yes, sir.
Yes, that's great. I'm opening this poem here and then you can go ahead. Yes.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Firstly, it was a pleasure listening to Dr. Rizwan Akhtar. It was a very informative comment. And I've gone through one of his poems called Empire's Days in Lahore. And my question regarding is that in the poem, there's a clear description of cultural hegemony and local resistance by the local saints that were present in Lahore and that are present in Lahore. But on the other side, there is also a description of people who are copying the only English words in small corners, which is probably the second line or the fourth line of the poem. So my question to Dr. Akhtar is how has he balanced cultural hegemony and local resistance in the poem?
Yes, I think Dr. Rizwan, you have muted your mic unintentionally, might be.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Yes, from the context and so forth. Yeah, you use the word clearly. Of course, as the poem introduces itself, that it's about past, as I said in my 30-minute talk, that it's post-colonial poetry is about the past, you see. But then we have a very important colonial space that's called the Mile Road. They constructed Lahore, the colonial Lahore. Apart from the Lahore that is built during the pre-colonial, this is the colonial Lahore now. And we also claim it, And you see how the colonial machine is represented by the images like clocks and officials. This is colonial machine, the administrative machine. So when you read the poem, obviously one writer that comes into your mind, that is Rudyard Kipling. And how he talks about it, the Kip about the Lord, the sons about the cannon, the pigeons and the Mall Road and the anarchy and the music. This is all about, as the title is more. So people, there was another class emerging who were copying the English class, the Anglo-Indian class. You see in the second stanza, you see English words in small corners. So people who are learning English by way of imitation, this is what it is actually. There are local people, you see, who are learning English, picking sounds of the words from the British, who goes to these marketplaces, you see. The market, and there used to be a market, an intellectual market, the very famous place, which is a kind of a bazaar, where the British used, and when the local vendors used to haggle with them, and there's this whole kind of life that emerges in the poem, And when the British speak, they are so swaggering, they are so arrogant, they are so haughty, they insinuate despair, and their big mouths out, they wear those, binoculars and glasses, you see. So this is a kind of a mockery of the English culture also. Use that resistance, you see, So this is an open place, you see. And they squeeze noses because they think that the natives are dirty and unhygienic and they smell and all that. So it has all that you can think, And English ladies, they're carrying the muslin handkerchiefs in their hands. As the poem quickly moves to Oriental College and Zamzam Cannon. That's what Kipling talked about. This is Mall Road, everything on the Mall Road, the bazaars and the British and the colonial machine, and how they used to come and buy, and the local vendors and the local population. You see. But as you point out, and I will try to pick up that. And the pigeons lasted all day taking flight. So if you closely observe near the Zanzibar Canal, there are pigeons, hordes and herds of pigeons, and people feed them. And this has been going on for ages, I tell you. And these pigeons also transport between the adjacent shrines on the other side and other shrines inside Anarchy. There are a couple of inside there. So these shrines, these pigeons actually circulate or hover over these spaces in Lahore. And of course you see the Lahore saints, the shrines of the Lahore saints. The pigeons fast all day taking flights to the shrines of Lahore saints all day. Who cultivated a mystic resistance? So it's the mystic, the local, the indigenous resistance. You see, it's that resistance in the sense that if you keep intact yourself or you keep yourself attached with what you have, it is also a resistance. But on the first part of you see how the colonial culture is overtaking people. They're learning English. They're imitating it. At the same time, they hate English, but they're also learning English. So these are the days the empire ruled, and one example is the Mall Road and the activity of the But Kipling, the son of Her Majesty, covered Lahore. He covered Lahore in his Gazette, Punjab Gazette, and many other writings. With all the might of a scholar rooted in Victorian grandeur, of ornament. Victorian age is also an age of ostentatiousness. That Victorian ostentatiousness is part of the English culture also. And they brought that ostentatiousness here. But the local culture, perhaps ironically, was not ostentatious because things in their context never become ostentatious. And much more. So these are some of the memory of the days when the Empire or the British Royal Empire ruled Lahore. So this is just a space in the poem which captures the attention of the persona, And in markets he braved European merchandise, noted the lust of seller and the piety of invader. You see, so the local seller also wants to make money, and the invader also wants to present the image of a benign intruder, which he is not obviously. If you go back to all the colonial economy, basically says that the local weavers, their thumbs were cut so that the local industry could not flourish. So I think the poem has everything, regarding the colonial invasion and its history and the economic policies and the cultural, habits of local people, native people, while on one hand, they did not like them, but on the other hand, they were also imitating them. So there's a lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rizwan. I think this poem is a very artistic aestheticization of the spatial and the temporal, imagination or the imagery in colonial times in Lahore, and that's what we have witnessed here. So.
Ginger white bodies, these are English women. Their complexion ginger white, and they're wearing French chiffon clothes. Chiffon is a French cloth.
Yes. How they.
And everything, and everything. Just see that.
Yes, that was beautiful. That was beautiful indeed. Now Shehnaz has raised her hand first, and I think she will be referring to a poem, Lahore, I Am Coming. That's also the title of the poem. Yes, Shehnaz.
Sir.
Assalam.
So firstly, thank you so much for being there with us. So actually, sir, my question is regarding the point Lahore, I Am Coming. So actually, I feel in the poem that there is a very rescuing tone in the poem. Sorry.
I think she said rescuing tone.
Yes.
Rescuing.
I have come to recollect you from the trunks of the neglect. Sir, it is a savior too, or is this responsibility of a poet too that he is a savior for a nation, for a culture? So this is my question.
Well, if you want to give this, this kind of entitlement to a poet, I would say no one would disagree with that. Would welcome that. I think it's more of a kind of a role of a preservant actually. One who preserves, history and things related to history. Because the title of its coming obviously means that the poet, the persona is shuffling between Lahore and other places, other geographies. Because you would find in this collection that there are also poems about other cities also, like Belfast, like London, like Edinburgh, Copenhagen, Stockholm. So these are other places and other places, It's not only about Lahore. And when you come back, actually, after say a self-exile or whatever form of exile, actually, you think that being away somehow a lot had happened in your absence, and it is now time actually to pay for that neglect actually. By writing poetry, you can pay for that neglect. By bringing Lahore into poetic life, by giving Lahore a poetic representation, you can pay what was long due for you actually. Or you can. So that's why I think that trunk image, that box image also in the thing. It's about that it has always been there, but you have been away. It's time to come back and just look after the city you belong to. its history, its culture, its time. It's a very nostalgic poem actually, long nostalgic, sort of a narrative, which has different 14 parts, and I would say, if not say, there at least one who preserves.
I think there was a book that I just referred to you in the class, Shinnaz and the others. That was the South Asian racialization and belongingness after 9/11. But if we just take it back towards in post-colonial context, I think this poem rightly fits into how a poet reclaims that belongingness and then how it works over there in different ways. So yes, since we have just I think we have 18 students, so that's why we are keeping this discussion very briefly, briefly. Otherwise, we can definitely extend it into so many other ways, particularly on this poem because that is, a very significant one. Yes. Next is Ikra, who has selected the poem "The Only Woman."
Oh.
Okay, Ikra. Well, I think Dr. Rizwan, that's a very interesting way that we are in 1 hour we are, coming across with so many poems and looking at your different ways of, the way you have quite different themes in your poetry.
Yeah.
Yes, Ikra.
Assalamualaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam.
Hope you're doing well. Firstly, thank you so much for giving us time for this wonderful session. Secondly, I'm going to show one of your poems called "The Only Women." And while reading, I was astonished to see you have incorporated so many themes, post-colonial themes, in a single poem, and which include identity, resistance, post-colonial impact on personal and colonial legacies. Besides these all themes, I would like to hear your stance on the velocity of the gaze, the gaze you have used in the middle of the poem, the velocity of the gaze.
Yeah, and the poem is on which page? Let me find out.
Yeah, it's on, I think it should be on 35 somewhere. No, it's on 14.
Right, the only woman. So, let me just flip the book. Okay, so it takes a little effort to turn your face into conversion. So, you are, sorry, I missed the question.
Yeah, can you just repeat that, Ikra?
Yeah, sir. My question is, as Sir have mentioned a lot of post-colonial themes in this poem, so I was wondering, like the phrase he has used, the velocity of the gaze. Is it the post-colonial gaze, or I'm just curious to hear his stance on it.
Yeah, I think the word velocity here definitely that the speed of the gaze, is enormous. So don't think that by using this word, which is primarily the word that we often use in science, particularly physics, actually, a direction and the rate of the motion. So perhaps there, the poem is talking about, and such she prohibits when the velocity of gaze, the gaze of a womb, now that's what you have to think. The speed of the gaze is enormous. So she finds herself vulnerable to that gaze. That gaze could have been, if you see from the feminist perspective, the gaze of the onlookers, the masculine onlookers, and that is enormous actually. But she can prohibit it. That means she can prevent it, she can block it. She can declare it unlawful. That gaze. She can build a barrier against that gaze. But that gaze kept on following her to all places because she's the only woman. So she's not the only woman, but she represents many women, to the garden, to the maze and music over tea. When sun ritualizes trees and owns the shadows, crowding grass with feet, she mirrors Earth's loneliness. So that's the loneliness of the wrong self, actually, the only woman. So you can You can get an imaginary picture of a woman. That what kind of a woman is an only woman in this society, or in a more general sense? You see. So you can make your speculations about that. So I think that in a very subversive way, the poem actually talks about the kind of the marginalization actually which women do encounter or face in a society. But I think the poem is keeping itself so detached that it is not only about the indigenous woman, it is about the woman in general actually. So the first two lines says that it is not easy to tempt her. It takes a little effort to tempt her. It means that don't take her vulnerability for granted, into conversation. So engaging women in a conversation is something that you can understand. What does it point out? Specifically in cultures where genders cannot mingle easily. So how can you tempt a woman, into conversation? Can you? Is it easy to? So I think it also explains a lot of, lot of things in a particular culture. Just like we were going beyond the culture, that in certain cultures it is very hard to get into conversation with opposite sex or opposite gender, and this conversation can never be linear or straight. It is always hesitant. It is always stammering. But it also points out fears, stammering, shouts, driving, and love life on wrinkled palms, straightening, history of frayed hairs, X's on eyes and ancient wigs. Her physical description also explains that she has been through a lot. She has been through a lot of difficulties, and how she moves through the landscape, her wrinkled palms, her frayed hairs, and the ancient bits on her face, and most of the time she is monosyllabic, but her silence is fluent. Silence. She's fluent in silence. On other parts, she's mostly monosyllabic. Yes, no, single word. So you can make a sense of the poem around that. What is the perspective there? I hope it explains a bit.
Yeah, I think that in this poem, if we look at it, was just my first glance to this poem, and the first interpretation could be that the way I think gender has been kept, culturally centered, and then this poem navigates with the interaction of women with the environment, in different ways. That's what has been imagined very briefly in the poem. Yes. Our next student is Arwa. Arwa is around, yes. And she has selected the poem Haunting. Yes. Yes, you are.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rizwan. It was an enlightening discussion from your side. And I have gone through your poem Haunting, and that reflects profound personal grief that arises from a backdrop of a trauma or a loss. I have, while going through the poem, I have seen that the poem does not present a linear narrative, but rather jumps from different moments or snapshots of memories. For example, from contemplating nature to reflecting a past interaction. Which suggests that the thoughts and the memories are disjoint, perhaps as a result of a grief or a trauma. And each perspective shifts. I think it gives a new layer of emotion under memories or a sense of presence or absence. So my question is, in what ways do the shifting perspectives in the poem blur the boundaries between the reality and the memory, and how does this contribute to its portrayal of haunting?
Yeah, as the title haunting means that the persona of the poem is being haunted by some memory, maybe a memory of the past or a more recent memory. But I think importantly, because the word haunting, it denotes some kind of a horror also, some kind of a spectacle of horror, and the description of the landscape, leaves, footsteps, wind, scattering, and someone walks frantically as if being chased by someone, and the body movement, the muscles, the legs, they are in a kind of hypnosis, and the body is in convulsions. It sets the scene. So someone who is walking, is certainly haunted physically also. And the impact is very much visible on the body when someone is walking quickly, conversions and registering references. And in that particular case, there are empty chairs on wet grass added to an empty strip of road. So there is this emptiness, the desolation, and a single walker who feels that who's being chased or haunted by someone. So this has a kind of a, sort of a quasi-gothic setting. Not gothic, but quasi-horror actually, what you call it. Kind of a supernatural touch also. It's a very strong tradition in English language poetry actually, or the European poetry. So there are empty chairs in the garden, there are too many leaves, the wind is ruffling. This is the whole scene. Someone is walking in measured steps, whose body is perhaps in a state of hypnosis, and there is an empty road. Now it is the persona, and I imagine future astronomers. In the place which has been walked by, will be walked by many other astronomers, and this also haunts me. I will not be here, they will be here. The astronomers, the future astronomers. About movies with weird endings, you see. There are certain horror movies which have very weird endings. Very weird endings. So when the guard told me, so this is a garden. This scene is a garden. Where the sanitarian told me, it's time that we are closing the garden now, leave the place. Even though I waited standing in distance. You took away my language. So I am also dumbfounded, failed to speak, failed to utter. Either it is a shock of the haunting, so you are absolutely numb, absolutely dead, silent, and what you are left with? Silence. And since then, you are chasing silence, which is very haunting. So this whole impact of haunting. I think it's a landscape poem also, but it has kind of a hush or a hush fear in it. It's like a lonely garden, and there's one person you watch, and then the person disappears, and then you leave the place, and you have nothing on your hands but silence, and you're chasing the silence, and that haunts you. It has that kind of weird ending also, because chasing silence is also a weird ending. So something weird. So life is weird.
So that was really beautiful. I believe that this poem is actually about the way the existence of post-colonial subject, is evaporated by means of its language and culture actually. And particularly, I was looking back to what Arundhati Roy has said once, that there is nothing like voiceless thing there. And some are deliberately silenced or preferably heard. I think that is a framework that Arundhati Roy has given to us to decipher the post-colonial patterns in linguistic and cultural terms from this poem. Yes.
Yeah, you can give it a post-colonial reading too, definitely.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Thank you for that. Our next student is Fiza. Fiza has selected a poem Lahore 2009. Fiza, you may correct us if we are wrong. Yes, welcome assalam. You might need to speak a little louder because we can't hear you properly.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. Thank you. My poem is Lahore 2009.
It's not your poem, it's the one you have selected, Fiza.
Yes, sir. I have selected a particular poem. As it is a tribute to the city of Lahore and it also touches on the themes of history, censorship and the blurring of borders. You have mentioned that tales of elopement and wedding couplet and cow and cross of the Ravi. It suggests that it is a mixture of traditional and modern elements. And then the image of the dying god and dust storm sea that hurt the eyes suggests that our city is both a mixture of beautiful and stubborn. In the context of postcolonialism, the poem can be seen as a celebration of Lahore's cultural identity and resistance to colonial dictatorship. You have claimed that the city is still mine can be seen as a declaration of ownership and pride in their cultural heritage. The blending of languages and imagery also reflects the hybridity and complexity of post-colonial identity. So my question is that how does the poem's focus on language and culture reflect on your own experiences and relationship with the city of Lahore? And can you please elaborate on the significance of the year 2011 in the title of your poem? Is there a specific event or memory that inspired you?
Interestingly, this poem was published in Poetry in New Zealand, a very prestigious magazine of New Zealand. So this answers the question, the earlier question that how you navigate. So, 2009, yeah, you can say that, but I think that it was what you call it was just an impulsive, it was an impulsive capturing of the city that someone is visiting the city with a gap and saying, oh, you are still mine, I haven't forgotten you. So this is just a reassertion, or what you call the reinforcing one's bond with a place, or reiterating one's ties with the city. The city is still mine. There is you're right, it's a declaration. It's a declaration, or it's a restatement of an oath, like, look, this place is so much inside me, that it's still mine. That I have been away, but it's still mine. So you are away from someone. So basically, the poem is based upon the idea of the beloved in Urdu ghazal, actually. Here the city is taken as a beloved, in fact. That's why at the end of the poem, our lips are dry with heat. You live in Lahore. We have just passed a great heat wave, The last 1 month was a heat wave in Lahore. Thankfully, we had some rain here.
Yeah.
The dust and the heat. But that's what Lahore is, the dust and the heat in the last 2 or 3 decades. After 80s and 90s, it changed actually, of course, partly due to globalization. Now, so, the lips are dry with heat. It lingers as a ghazal is brewed in wine. Suddenly, this intoxication of ghazal and the analogy and the wine, man, which is a pretty good word for wine, so common in ghazal. So it's the beloved also. It lingers as a ghazal is brewed in wine. So the city is lingering, just like, a ghazal is brewed in wine. So this intoxication that comes with the city, or even the memory of the city. So, and your question was perhaps this, is it about a particular movement? I think it's about impulse, because love is impulsive. And you love someone impulsively. That's what the whole Eastern idea of love is actually. It's not about devotion, it's about being madhosh. The fine and the brilliant and all that. And these are the ideas they're doing. So that's why in my talk it's very important to be in touch with your tradition actually. So there's so many poems basically which are actually about, the tradition, which means the poetic yarns, for example, or Nazam later on, or Qasida, or something like that. The Arabic tradition, the Indo-Arabic, the Indo-Sanskrit tradition, Indo-Persian tradition, just like the word rakasa in the old Courtesans is the only word that would have come for me. No other word but rakasa, which is actually a Persian word, raqs. So similarly here, Lahore is seen impulsively, because when you reiterate your love for someone, you hug or you embrace someone impulsively. So the poet is impulsively embracing the city. You are still mine, come on. I haven't forgotten you. I haven't forgotten your skies, the kites, the streets, the vendors of junk food, the Punjabi language, the chilies, the street food of Lahore, you name it. See? So it has tradition, but sometimes the Lahore also crosses the borders of words. There are tales of elopement. There are wedding couplets, see. Let's start with the cow down cross of the river Ravi. So Ravi is another identity of Lahore, where buffalo swim and there is a cow and Ravi is dying actually. It's no more the Ravi used to be. So there's a lot of nostalgia also, see. And the tales of elopement we know. And the wedding couplets, which we sing on the wedding, the Punjabi wedding couplets, you see, Maya, Tapa, all that. So this is all that, the Punjab, the culture, everything is there. It becomes the hub of everything. There's also a river, but the river is unfortunately dirty now. It has cow down, but the cows and the buffaloes, they do swim in the river now. And then Lahore is ultimately a decent courtesan, which is well versed in the art of betel leaf chewing. How you chew the betel leaf, जिसको आप गलोरी कहते हैं. Even ये भी बताया जाता था कोर्टेसान को कि आपने अपने मुंह में जो पान रखना है, उसको chew कैसे करना है. तो ऐसे ही उसको chew करके कितनी movements हैं. ये पूरा finesse है, ये पूरा art है जो कि कोर्टेसान deliver कर रही है. हम इसको you can link that point with other points about Lahore, just like the title poem. One of the points about courtesans. So this will come into that cluster of poems which are predominantly about Lahore, past and the Lahore present. The past and the present. This is more into present as it's in 2009. But don't you think this by 2009 it still has the lingering memory of the courtesan of the ghazal? Because the ghazal is timeless, ghazal is endless, a poem is endless. It never runs out. Your still mind means that you are still mind. That means that I haven't changed. My feelings for you haven't changed actually. And a courtesan is who wears blooming jasmine, the flowers which women wear, the garlands, the dances with antlers, feet antlers, and how when a woman and a courtesan dances, how her spiry luxury uncases itself, reveals itself. So the whole reveals itself, you know. But sometimes there are dust storms which hurt the eyes. And then the history is censored. Behind the dying walk alone. You know. And your lips become dry with heat. But then it's the muscle, the mind that cuts it, that moistens it. You know. And then in the final portion there, the sky, the kite, which is a symbol of when you enter Lahore, you will see that there's a kite in Lahore. There are kites in Lahore's horizons. And the kite plummets, and the children run after it, chase it, hunt it, get it, possess it. You're still mine. So there are different images actually which explains the poet's love for the city. At the moment, impulsively, 2009.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rizwan. I think I have found the caption for my next picture and experience whenever I will come across heat wave there. These two lines, though lips are dried with the heat, it lingers as if ghazals brewed in wine. I think is the perfect one to mention there with your name. So next is Kainat. Yes, Kainat has selected a poem, My Loss.
My loss.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us to discuss your insights and perspectives have been truly enlightening and greatly appreciated. So I asked the question about your poem My Loss, which is actually a poem
Kainat, you are not audible clearly. You might need to check with the jack of the microphone because that's what that is making this interruption there. You are audible, but there is some distortion of the noise there. We may go with the other student and you may come up later on. I think we have Malaika with us. Malaika?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Yes, Malaika has selected a poem, Evening on Lahore Canal. Yes.
Okay.
and that is yes, Munaf, go ahead.
Sayyid Malai.
Right.
Firstly, sir, thank you so much for such insightful discussion. So I've chosen this poem, and reading this poem, I've noticed that the poem beautifully captures the serene, yet we can say complex atmosphere by the canal, which highlights both its natural beauty and the human presence that animates it. So my question to you is that what do you think, or in what ways do the natural beauty and human presence described in the poem reflects resilience, or we can say cultural identity in post-colonial Lahore?
Well, you see that this is a poem which is very descriptive, a descriptive poem about a particular space, a particular place, the Lahore Canal, and it is given a kind of a human face or human. It has been given a human life, or personification in simple words, you see. And you see that each couplet is some kind of a description, adding up a description, And there's trees, and then there are black grass, and then there are children, skinny children. You know that the children swim in the Lahore Canal, they jump into it all days, specifically all days, And these are kind of the rituals that the canal offers or witnesses, you see. And then you see a lot of, stuff in the waters, the broken rubber tires, the twigs, and the muddy, formless ashes. Sometimes the water stops, and there are whirlpools, you see. And there are also lovers, like runaway lovers, or drunk lovers, who find some solace on the banks of the canal. And they are trying to be sensual, but they cannot, because the country has very strong morality codes, and you cannot actually become physically involved in public spaces. So there's quite a few things that the post-colonial Lahore actually, and they are in the middle of their sensuality. That means they cannot accomplish their sensual ends or their physical or sexual desires, you see. But at least they can sit on the banks of the Lahore, like the trees on the banks of the Lahore, the lovers, the children, the lovers, the trees, the grass, the human and the non-human. They all gather on the close, but it's an evening scene actually. So it's a poem which is very much about the involvement, in an urban space to see. And then there are deep clouds hanging over the sky of Lahore. The water is ochre brown, and ochre brown watery silence arrests closure. Because the water continues, so the closure is arrested. There is no ending to the canal. The water will flow timelessly. There's no stopping to it. There's no closure to it. I think it's again a poem of a movement actually. It's a poem which is about movements in which people choose a space to see, and they bring their emotional selves also. But there are also crows, and there are also trees, and there are skinny children, and then there are swirling densities, you see. So I think it's a poem, for me it's a poem of movements actually. Perhaps that's all I can say about that.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Rizwan, for briefly pondering over it. Qudsiya Khan is here. She has selected the poem Winter's Erasure.
Okay.
Qudsiya, let me just check if she's around. Oh, yes, she is.
Winter's Erasure.
Yeah, we just need to check that if she has listened her name, and because so that she can just unmute herself. Okay, I guess that Qudsiya is not around, but maybe we can then check with Taiba. Yes, Taiba has selected another poem that is a lover's plaint for Muhammad. Oh yes, Taiba, go ahead, please.
So first I wanted to thank you for your starting discussion on post-colonial poetry. I gratitude and appreciated the new perspective on hybridity and transcultural influence. So as I selected the poem on Lover's Planet from the Pastry of One, as like the poem use of language and imagery made based on cultural influence, like you mentioned at the start of this session. And as I look closely to the poem, there are some allusions or references. We can say that references like instant that there is a reference to Muslim terms, and there is a strong shape and the word meaning and these are the words that evoke Islamic traditions, but it expressed in English or Korean language. Sometimes this blend of cultural and linguistic elements to kind of post-colonial that's all that.
Okay. Now, this is basically a piece which is based upon the form of puzzle actually. If you see the refrain, an illusion, not illusion but allusion, because you see that there's a lot about the Prophet that you learn from different, you learn both explicitly and implicitly, in the tradition. So it's the memory of the Prophet, even if it's an illusion, ishara or illusion. So the point is, basically, it is all about, the protocols of Sufi is what you call the protocols and the parameters of Sufi thought. Because Ghazal has a very strong connection with Sufism. That's what Tayyaba Rana has also argued in her essay. So here the speaker of the poem is saying that even if it's a memory, even if it's just a simple illusion, it's enough. And on the shrine of a Sufi, you come in real. So the illusion can become real. You see, illusion can become reality. The sea sent wind enters through crevices of red bricked house. Now the language is highly allegorical and symptomatic. Red bricked house, Gabriel the angel touched your feet with eyelashes. This was the climate Prophet was asked to get up, and there was a horse, a blinged chariot, a rock ready for the Prophet to take him to the Al-Aqsa Pass, from where he took his nightly journey, which is called Ascension Mirage. So definitely the poem is about that Islamic connotation and the metaphysics to see that is about it. But this journey was an illusion, symbolic, but it was also real. So for some it is symbolic, for others it is real.
Thank you so much. And sir,
in each couplet there is an allusion actually to something, something that has happened in the past and has to do with Islamic history. Just like in the third part, you see this about the mother of the Prophet Ashmael, Hagara or Hajara, who made this allegorical or symbolic run 7 times before the water came out. And then in the next part, here coming on broad shoulders, you see, this is also an illusion of Prophet physical, because he had very long hairs. So these are all allusions to Prophet, and then allusion to Adam. that when Adam was expelled from paradise, you see, he saw the name of the Prophet on the gate of the paradise. And it's only because of this he was redeemed or pardoned for what he has committed. That's another illusion. Maybe Christian history may be here, biblical be here, or Quranic or Islamic be. So there's a lot of illusion, poetic, or guiding. You see, and in the next drama there is a typical ghazal situation in which the spiritual love is often seen in this image of a beloved or a bridal who's covering her head and who's shy and who's looking down. So in the Muslim tradition, the Prophet and the God and the Prophet and the Creator, they are like lovers. And this is very much justified with some of the verses in the Quran. So this is a kind of a piece of writing which actually encapsulates the spiritual or the metaphysical side of Islamic, or Islamic tradition, or the persona of the Prophet, sacred and illuminating.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Then we have Abira with us, and probably this poem will bring a shift in our discussion. That is Under House Arrest in 1979. Abira, are you around?
Sir, am I audible to you?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so sir, firstly, thank you so much for this interactive session. And the poem I have selected is Under House Arrest in 1979. So after...
Okay.
Sir, am I audible to you?
Yes, you are.
Okay, sorry. So, the poem, actually, I have selected this poem Under House Arrest in 1979, and after reading it, I have come across the context behind this poem, that was the representation of political and social turmoil in Pakistan, which brings the oppressive atmosphere during General Ziaul-Haq's military regime. So I found this poem as an exploration of confinement and isolation. So my question to you is that have you personally experienced this political imprisonment, or what inspired you to write this poem? And if it's based on your personal experiences, then did you write this poem as a form of resistance? Is your fraction in the poem sentence, which means the punishment for speaking directly against the oppression at the time. So is it a form of resistance to narrative?
Yeah, so I think firstly, I was too young to be present at that time, by the way. But I have some very vague memories, my first part of my childhood, when Zati Bhutto was hanged and Pakistan was in political turmoil. There's another poem, Alphabets, which was published in a very prestigious British magazine of Postcolonial Literature. That's the free, if you know about it. This one was also an international publication. So definitely it's going to be about a political movement in the history of Pakistan when Zati Bhutto's assassination occurred. And it tells that how this transformation actually became a watershed movement in the history, of the country, and the destabilization is confirmed actually, and a long period afterwards, you see, of oppressiveness. You see, yes, you can. If you are a supporter of a particular political party, then obviously that his figure was a figure of resistance, although history explains a lot. So once again the poem begins with a Lahore actually. So you see the post-execution, after his execution, what happened is the poem actually. So the poem is registering the post-execution reaction actually. For example, brown evenings, brown houses, cold black sky, sepia tone walls, the yellow walls. The night is like a scarecrow. And then the poem shifts to the prison. The bricks, his own white body on a couch, corners of his room are blanked, There is no language, solitary imprisonment, and there are books Bhutto used to read in his prison. So I have read some of his books and his biography, studying about Zulfi Bhutto of Pakistan. And he was also put homeless in Lahore, outside in his house garden, a squirrel is electrocuted. Now that is poetic imagination. Just like sometimes you have a fence outside the garden, you don't want animals to come, and you make the fence electrocuted. And the squirrel is trapped in the electrocuted fence. So is the man trapped. And so there is darkness, there are trackless stars. And some of his last was he used to walk on the prison roof alone at night. He was given when he was house arrest, shrugging shoulders. Now you see, like in sentence that you are hanged for what you say. You are punished in life for what you are saying. Sentenced for words. So all those revolutionary people who want to change, or people who resist, they are always punished, or they are always, eliminated for their words, because the words bring the change. You're sentenced for words. And in the early morning newspapers, there are stories of his hanging. Every dawn, on every morning dawn, there's a story. We see the image of the noose, noose in the neck, the clock, that traditional way of giving, of hanging, So the language is also taught. So the poem is a lot that I have read in Urdu also. There are so things. The resonance, you can feel the resonance if you have read Urdu literature or local culture. Or if you see the response of his hanging, nonetheless he's a very controversial figure. But someone who's hanging actually, who's hanging made formidable headlines, So it's a political poem, yes, nonsense, yes. Yes, this is called the historicization of politics.
Yes, this is. So I think we have only 2 or 3 students which are left. But Dr. Rizwan, you can just let us know if you're comfortable with that. We can take 2 or 3 more, students with us, because it's 5:30.
You can take a couple. You can take 2 more.
Okay, thank you. Do we have Hussain here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Hussain.
My question is rather general. I was reading your book and I was wondering, what are your inspirations? Like what kind of poetry or novels or dramas you like to read or something? Or what kind of genre inspires? What are your inspirations?
Oh, my inspiration. I do a lot of different things, and since my adolescence, I've been reading regional literature, Urdu literature. I have some amount of knowledge of Arabic and Persian. So I've read some Persian classics this week, some Arabic classics this week, in translations, and of course a lot of literature. But I read a lot of poetry in English language and in translation also. I like classics to see, like Dostoevsky, Flaubert, and I read different kind of books. I love biographies of writers and and political thinkers and philosophers also. So, but if you're talking about poetry, I think I have quite a few. There are a lot of poets that really inspired me. One of them is Wordsworth, English language. Talking about English language. One of those Wordsworth that I think he is my favorite, and Hughes, the English poets, and W. Jordan also. And then I read a lot of poets in translations, specifically East European poets. They're wonderful actually, like Salome, and And more recent times, you see, I think I fell in love with Harry Potter, I think. Once I became a student, actually, it was a lot of Caribbean poetry and Walcott also. So it's a pretty, it's great discursive trajectory that it's reading different kind of writers.
Yes, thank you. So two students actually couldn't come up with their questions. I mean, over there. Yeah, but they have posted something in the messages if you can have a look at, and you can just briefly in 1 or 2 minute talk you can briefly respond to that, because I believe like what Kainat has talked about while referring to your poem My Loss, probably you have already discussed in the later discussion of your initial talk, but it's totally up to you how you want to respond, like very briefly.
Yeah, I think that My Loss is also a poem which is about this, what I earlier said is that you're writing under the shadows of realism, So it's the loss of your history, the loss of your language that you definitely more and more. And one way of learning more is to write, in fact. So writing is a form of creative mourning for many writers.
I got it. Then we have Mr. Barira, Miss Barira. I think also mentioned a poem in the message. In the chat box you may see she has mentioned about the last letter. That how does this poem by a writer show a connection between language and culture after colonialism? Does it question or support the main ideas about the identity? She's facing some internet issue and that's why she couldn't come up with that. I can open even over here the last letter. Yes, that's the one.
The last letter is on page number what?
It's page number 113. That's the last poem we are discussing.
Okay, yeah, the last letter. We made some mistakes to place on it. It's like a long letter writing, epistolary, narratives. You see, when you write a letter, what happens to you? It is something that what happens to you when you write anything, actually, kind of a letter. I mean, the last letter is a kind of a, sort of an emotional, way of putting closure on things, and we know that there is no closure. It's an illusion that there is a closure. So when you write letter, you use unstopped conversations. Unstopped is basically that you use in poetry. When a simple utterance can do, language hurdles bodies, rescue vehicles, separate them, hit them. Lahore is a rubble of expressions. Again, it's Lahore actually.
Yes.
It's just like a pile of expressions, bridges and tracks run over towns. So Lahore has changed, a lot of bridges and all that, And someone is conveying this pain of Lahore becoming a concrete, becoming a zone of concrete in a letter to someone. That look, this is not the city it used to be. It has become a zone of concrete actually. So it means that the person who is writing the letter is feeling the impact of the city being crushed, city being transformed into concrete, bridges, tracks and all that. There is dust, like a dictionary. Dust carries an eternal dictionary, eyes regime unwanted endings. Love finds way in all synonyms. This is the last letter. So there are ways of expressing your love for a place. This is not a love letter, but this is a love letter to Lahore actually. And this is being conveyed to someone, but this is the worst that can happen to a city. Nothing can go beyond that. So I think basically it's once again a kind of a lament that how the city has changed. And even the letter writer finds it very difficult to break silence on that. Because he's wounded from inside. He wants to convey, but he says language huddles this body, just like bodies huddle, but then Lahore has turned into a river of expressions. That means that when you see these building materials and bridges and concrete and everything, this material, you feel as if your expression has become a rubble. It's useless, it's become the rubble. Nothing else but. So this is the last thing that you can talk about the city that is being gradually and slowly, deformed.
Yes, Dr. Rizwan, thank you so much once again. I believe that, like Sara Sulairi has written an article on a passage to India. That was the geographical landscape of a passage to India. She has discussed so many things. There is a lot of research that so far, we have come across on your book, Lahore, I Am Coming. We have looked at the thematic occupations and other, and the way I have even incorporated even two chapters in my PhD thesis upon this book because of its in-depth aestheticization of Pakistani and post-colonial metaphor. I believe another research that should be done on this book is to look at chronologically, your experiences in different poems, because I believe that most of the poems in the book are about Lahore, and that shows the way you have interacted at different times. Because like this letter, it's totally different. The last letter probably creates a digression from what you have written in Lahore, I Am Coming, and then totally from the other ones. So there is a geographical landscape that needs to be explored. It's a kind of a mapping over there that needs to be explored in your poems, and that should be done somewhere. Probably in this kind of a research, the assistance of the help of the poet requires a lot, because only by that way we can think of that which poem has been written first or later, because some of them have some years over there, because like you have went somewhere and then you wrote like, okay, at that time you did it. So I believe that this could be a very potential research that needs to be done, and I believe someone will do. We have a lot of scholars here, and they are on their ways towards their thesis stage, probably in the after next semester. So let's see who explores this new phase. So yes, another thing is that I want to thank you, my some guests from outside, including Alina Shehzad, and then there were a few who just left us before. Alina is a faculty member over there in Namal, Islamabad, and she's doing a PhD from Islamic. I believe that you probably have enjoyed this session. Would you like to add something here? If she's around. I think she's not, or she couldn't hear us. And so, with this thought, I would like to conclude this session that I usually tell my students that literature has roots in all disciplines of knowledge, and I believe this book also, help us to engage with post-colonialism, or in resistance, or in hybridity, or in many ways. It interprets or creates Lahore at different levels, circling back to its political, its economic, its religious, or cultural, or societal, and even spatial and temporal occupations there. And that shows the ways this book can be explored even with its future directions. So thank you so very much, Dr. Rizwan Akhtar, once again, and we have really learned a lot, and inshallah we look forward to you once again on some other day.
Thank you, Rahman. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz.